start the Lathrup Village Election Commission meeting today, Wednesday, September 8th, 2021. The time is 5:01. So this meeting has been called to order. Next will be the roll call. Commissioner Baker.
Present. Addison Township, Oakland County, Michigan.
Commissioner Medley.
Present. Stony Brook, Suffolk County, New York.
And I'm in McKinney, Texas, Collin County. We have a quorum. First order of business after roll call will be the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
flag
of the United States of America and to the
of
republic
the Republic
for which it
which
stands, one nation,
nation
under God, indivisible,
Indivisible,
with liberty and
liberty
justice.
and justice
for all.
Thank you. Next, we will have an approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion and second, please?
I motion to approve.
And that was a second, Commissioner Baker?
Yes.
Okay, the sound is going in and out sometimes. Okay, and I will do roll call. Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
Commissioner Medley?
Yes.
And I'm voting yes for the approval of the agenda. Motion carried. Number 5 will be the Election Commission minutes from the remote meeting of September 3rd, 2021. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Roll call. Commissioner Medley?
Approve.
I'm voting yes for approval. And Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
Motion carried for approval of September 3rd, 2021 Election Commission minutes. Motion carried. Next, item number 6 is public comments for items on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. And if there are any hands raised or anyone who would like to make public comments, you may do so at this time.
Commissioner Talley, you have no hands. Oh, there's one. Mr. Ruffalo.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment in this section. So I want to call your attention to a concern that I have on Exhibit 4, specifically the affidavit of identity for Barbara Canez that may have been overlooked. So the law states that the affidavit should be signed in the presence of a notary public. And we all know and understand that the sole purpose of a notary is to attest that the individual is present and is in fact signing the document. According to MCL section 55.285-5, it states that in all matters where the notary public takes a verification upon oath or affirmation, or witnesses or attests to a signature, the notary public shall require that the individual sign the record being verified, witnessed or attested to in the presence of the notary public. Now, with that being said, I don't understand how Ms. Canez could have signed the affidavit in the presence of a notary as dated on the document if it was notarized 2 days before she signed it herself. Let me clarify. If we look at section 5 of Barb's affidavit, that's page 22 of our packet, you'll see that the notary and the candidate signed the document on different days. The document was notarized on July 17th by Oakland County Notary Public, Lisa Hess. However, the affidavit was signed, dated, and filed on July 19th, 2 days after it was notarized. So this clearly indicates that it was not signed in the presence of a notary. Therefore, I think making this affidavit invalid and should be disqualified. Now, even if this was a simple mistake, believe me, we all make them. These are the dates of record that were written on the affidavit, and that document must stand on its own exactly like all the others. So with that being said, I look forward to the discussion on this topic as the Election Commission deliberates shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further public comments?
Oh, shoot. Yes. One hand raised, Barbara. There we go.
Hello. I didn't even decide to run until the evening of the 17th. I acquired signatures on both the 18th and the 19th, took the paperwork to the notary the evening of the 19th, and that was signed in the presence of a notary and in the presence of an attorney at the same time. That's my comment.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
No hands raised at this time.
Thank you. So that will end the public comment for item number 6. We will move on to item number 7, which are the action requests. And it's to receive amended legal opinion and implement recommendation therein. And will there be an introduction to this?
I think last time we kind of skipped the introduction. So if possible, if someone from Butzel would like to kind of introduce and go over their amended opinion letter, as well as, if possible, address some of the comments that were raised during the public comment, I think that would be a great way to start this off.
Yes, I'll start off. First of all, we appreciate everyone taking the time to be here. This matter is of great importance to us, and we all want to get this right now to help avoid any costly problems down the road. Butzel's review, the scope of review was limited to the sufficiency of the candidates' affidavits of identity. On Friday, September 3rd, we provided our preliminary opinion to this election commission. And based on additional information that we received during Friday's meeting and having sufficient time to review the AOI's affidavits of identity and reviewing Michigan case law, our amended opinion is that each of the candidates' affidavits is sufficient except for those submitted by Mr. Marvin Moore and Mr. Greg Ruffalo II, whose names should be omitted from the ballot for want of an affidavit of identity that strictly complies with MCL 168-558-2 of the Michigan election law. As background, the requirements for a proper affidavit of identity is set forth in section 558-2. And in our opinion letter, for ease of reference, we enumerated these requirements and walked through each requirement for each candidate. Also for background, the legal standard in the Michigan election case law is that AOIs, there needs to be strict compliance with section 558. The failure to supply a facially proper AOI is grounds to disqualify a candidate from inclusion on the ballot. And the city clerk has a duty to not certify to the Board of Election Commissioners the name of a candidate who fails to comply with section 558. So Joe, just to confirm, I should go through each candidate.
Yes, I think that would be helpful for everyone who's following along.
Okay, let's do that. All right, 1 second. All right, so going alphabetically, the first was Mark Disick. The first requirement, his affidavit bears his name and his residential address, so that is confirmed. The second requirement, he marked the circle in section 5 of his AOI, attesting that he is a citizen of the United States. Mr. Disick, for his third requirement, he states that he is running for city council. The fourth requirement, in marking the circle in section 5, he also attested that he meets the statutory and constitutional requirement for the office he seeks. The sixth requirement, the affidavit lists how he wishes to have his name appear on the ballot. So therefore, our opinion was that Mr. Disick's AOI complied with section 558.2, and we detect no reason to exclude him from the ballot. The second candidate was Mr. Jalen Jennings. Mr. Jennings satisfied requirement 1. The affidavit bears his name and residential address. He satisfied requirement 2. He marked the circle in section 5 of the affidavit, attesting that he is a citizen of the United States. The third requirement, he states that he is running for city council. I believe at the last meeting, Commissioner Baker asked, whether a candidate's failure to mark the circle for primary or general election is a disqualification. Mr. Jennings' affidavit is an example of where the affidavit failed to mark this circle. And although he wrote the date of the general election in the space provided, it is our opinion that requirement 3 only requires affiants to state the name of the office they seek, information about the term of office, example, the date of the election, the commencement of the term, or the end of the term, is not part of the name of the office. And the omission of such information is not required under section 558. So he satisfied requirement 3. The fourth requirement, he marked the circle in section 5, which attests that he meets the statutory and constitutional requirements for city council. The sixth requirement, the affidavit lists how he wishes to have his name on the ballot. So in conclusion, we believe Mr. Jennings satisfied all the requirements for section 558. The next candidate that we looked at was Mr. Bruce Cantor. Mr. Cantor satisfied the first requirement. His affidavit bears his name and residential address. The second requirement is he marked the circle in section 5, stating that he is a citizen of the United States. The third requirement, he states that he is running for city council. The fourth requirement, because he marked the circle in section 5, he also attested that he meets the statutory and constitutional requirements. And the sixth requirement, the affidavit lists how he wishes to have his name on the ballot. We did highlight in our amended opinion, Mr. Cantor also filled out an affidavit and petitions for the partial term for city council. Under MCL 168.558.5, a person cannot be a candidate for more than one office at a time. It's called incompatible holding of office. He followed the proper protocols though, and he was not in violation of section 558, and he dropped his candidacy for the partial term. It is our opinion that Mr. Cantor's affidavit of identity complied with all requirements for section 558.2. One second. Next, we have Ms. Barbara Canez. Ms. Canez, she satisfied requirement 1, which was the affidavit bears her name and residential address. Second, she marked the circle in section 5 of the affidavit attesting that she is a citizen of the United States. Third, the affidavit states that she seeks the office of city council member. Although Ms. Knez, and this was brought up in the last meeting, she did not designate the primary or general election for which she was petitioning. The identification of the term of the office or the election at which her name is to appear on the ballot is not part of the title of the office sought in compliance of section 558. So she meets requirement 3. The fourth requirement was in marking the circle in section 5, she also attested that she meets the statutory and constitutional requirements for the office. Sixth requirement is met. The affidavit lists how she wishes to have her name on the ballot. At the last meeting, I believe it was Commissioner Medley noted that Ms. Knez did not list her date of birth in the affidavit and asked if this disqualified her. Section 558 does not require that candidates list their dates of birth. And also the Bureau of Elections officials manual confirms that a date of birth is only recommended, it is not required. So it is our opinion that her decision to omit her date of birth does not disqualify her from the statutory requirements and appearing on the ballot. So in conclusion, Ms. Knez's affidavit of identity complied with section 558.
And Steve, I'll jump in here to address the question that was raised by Mr. Ruffalo regarding the mismatch of the dates on Ms. Knez's affidavit, the date she signed versus the date that appears in the notarial blocks, jurat. There is actually a published Court of Appeals decision on point. It is Stumbo versus Rowe, and it was decided June 5th of 2020. And in that case, there was an identical issue where the date of the signature for the candidate did not match the date of the jurat. And the court held that that was not a fatal defect because the person's date is not required. The candidate need only sign. There's no mention of a date requirement. The only person that's required to sign and date the notarial act is the notary. And because that was done in that case, the court said that the affidavit technically satisfied the strict requirements of section 558. And so we have here exactly the same situation. Ms. Knez signed, which is what she's required to do, and then the notary signed and dated, which is what the notary is required to do. And so, although I understand the concern about the mismatch of the dates, and it sounds like somebody may have just put down the wrong date, it does nonetheless technically satisfy the statute as the Court of Appeals held in Stumbo. And so that's why we have not seen fit to recommend disqualification of Ms. Knez on that ground. In all other respects, as Mr. Etherly just explained, she does meet those statutory requirements.
Okay, I just want to ask a question really quickly because I think you need a point of clarification.
Sure.
So you just said it doesn't matter what date, and I think dates have been a very important conversation as we've been going forward. So can you clarify what dates are important? Because I know that Mr. Ruffalo had a date that is disqualifying him, and what dates are not, because I just like that on the public record. So
Sure.
we have dates that have to be met and dates that, as you've indicated here, don't have to be met.
Sure, I'd be happy to briefly go over this, and Steve, if you've got any additional points, please feel free to jump in as well. The cutoff date for filing the affidavit is July 20th. And so if somebody did not submit a correct affidavit of identity along with the nominating petitions and any other information that's required by July 20th, then they're kind of stuck, they're frozen in time with what they have, and we analyze whether they've met the statute as of that date. The specific question about that Mr. Ruffalo raised, which is there a technical deficiency because the dates don't match on the document? The dates are before July 20th. And so we say, okay, the question then becomes, is all of the information in the affidavit compliant with the statute? And this inconsistency that he's identified correctly, that inconsistency does exist on the document. The Court of Appeals has said that that inconsistency is not fatal to a proper affidavit. So because she got it in on time and that condition wasn't fatal, and all of the other conditions that are required were satisfied, we've concluded that she is properly on the ballot. Does that help explain kind of the dates that matter?
It does. I just wanted it on public record because it wasn't in the opinion that we received.
Sure. So Steve, with that, unless any of the commissioners have any questions regarding Ms. Canez, if we could perhaps move on to the next candidate.
Yes. 1 second. Sorry, I lost my place. I know we're on Ms. Miller.
Yeah, page 7 of the affidavit or of the
Yes,
PDF.
we are on Karen Miller. So going back,
Actually, I think you skipped. Oh, you're right. Oh, Karen Miller. Sorry.
no problem. So Ms. Miller satisfied requirement 1. Her affidavit bears her name on it. Sorry, I need to zoom out. Her second requirement, she marked the circle in section 5 of the affidavit that saying that she is a US citizen. The next requirement, third requirement, the affidavit states that she seeks the office of city council member. Ms. Miller satisfied the fourth requirement in marking the circle in section 5. She also attested that she meets the statutory and constitutional requirements for the office. And she also meets the 6th requirement. The affidavit lists how she wishes to have her name appear on the ballot. I believe we already addressed with another candidate at the last meeting. It was raised that there was a question about the omission of the date of birth on the affidavit. Again, the date of birth is not required, and it is not a disqualification from the requirements of section 558. Therefore, it was our opinion that Ms. Miller's affidavit complies with section 558(2). Moving on to Mr. Marvin Moore. Mr. Moore satisfied requirement 1. His affidavit bears his name and residential address. And this was the second requirement, which was raised at the last meeting. Mr. Moore failed to attest that he is a citizen of the United States and failed to mark the circle in section 5 of the affidavit. For completeness, we noted that Mr. Moore attested as a circulator on his nominating petition that he is a US citizen. But section 558(2) unambiguously requires that the citizenship attestation appear in the affidavit. This is regardless of whether the nomination petition, checking the box that he's a circulator, that he's a US citizen, is not going on the affidavit. And now Mr. Moore's situation is akin to a Court of Appeals opinion from June 24th, 2021, where the court held that a village council candidate's failure to check the box in section 5 was a fatal defect. The court ruled that the county election officials were required by law to refrain from certifying the plaintiff as a candidate, and plaintiff had no right to appear on the ballot. The court further ruled that there is simply no statutory provision for amending an AOI after the deadline has already passed. It did not matter that the plaintiff in that case was in fact a US citizen. The third requirement was met. The affidavit states that he seeks the office of city council. The fourth requirement was not met by failing to mark the circle in section 5. He also failed to attest that he meets the statutory and constitutional requirements for the office he seeks. Again, for completeness, although he said that he was a US citizen for his nomination petition also did not attest to the statutory and constitutional requirements for the office. So that independently, that fourth requirement is independently a disqualification. The sixth requirement, the affidavit lists how he wishes to have his name appear on the ballot. So going through these requirements of section 558, and despite his attesting on his nomination petition that he is a US citizen, it is still our opinion that Mr. Moore's AOI fails to comply with section 558.2, and that his name should be excluded from the November 2021 general election ballot. And this is bolstered by the strict compliance required under section 558, and that comes from Michigan case law. And because the July 20th deadline has already passed, Mr. Moore cannot now amend his deficient affidavit. And again, that came from the Moore v. Genesee County Court of Appeals opinion. The next candidate is Greg Ruffalo II. Mr. Ruffalo satisfied the first requirement. His affidavit bears his name and the residential address. Mr. Ruffalo satisfied the second requirement. He marked the circle in section 5 of the affidavit attesting that he is a US citizen. Mr. Ruffalo did not satisfy the third requirement. He did not identify the office he seeks in his affidavit. We note that Mr. Ruffalo twice tried to cure this deficiency by filing an unsworn statement on July 22nd, 2021, and an affidavit of intent on July 23rd, 2021, attesting to a conversation that he had with an unnamed representative at the city, during which he confirmed his intent to run for the partial term of office. Unfortunately, these efforts do not cure the deficiency. Section 558.2 unambiguously requires the title of the office sought to appear in the affidavit of identity. If you parse the language of section 558.2, the subject of the first sentence in subsection 2 is the affidavit, not the candidate. This is consistent with the Bureau of Elections guidance that provides that only affidavits of identity with a revision date of 2/2029 or 8/2019. I'm sorry, 2/2019 and 8/2019 are the only approved affidavit of identity forms. The legislator has delegated to the Secretary of State for issuing uniform instructions and uniform forms. And this comes from the Stumbo opinion as well. Therefore, Mr. Ruffalo's unsworn statement and affidavit of intent are not the approved affidavit of identity form. And regardless, they would not have sufficed to provide the information required on the affidavit of identity itself. To cure this deficiency, Mr. Ruffalo could have simply executed another AOI form with the required information before the July 20th filing deadline. For completeness, Mr. Ruffalo satisfied requirement 4. He marked the circle in section 5. He also attested to meeting the statutory and constitutional requirements. And he satisfied requirement 6. The affidavit lists how he wished to have his name appear on the ballot. So in conclusion, despite Mr. Ruffalo's substantial compliance with section 558 and his efforts to cure the deficiency on the AOI form, it is still our opinion that Mr. Ruffalo's AOI fails to comply with section 558 and that his name should be excluded from the ballot for the general election because strict compliance is required under section 558. And further, because the July 20th deadline has already passed, Mr. Ruffalo cannot now amend his deficient AOI. And there's case law, again, supporting these statements. The last individual is, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this name, Mr. Siddiqui satisfied the first requirement. His affidavit bears his name and a residential address. He satisfied the second requirement. He marked the circle in section 5 of the affidavit, attesting that he is a US citizen. Mr. Siddiqui satisfied requirement 3. He states he's running for city council. He satisfied requirement 4 by marking the circle in section 5. He attests that he meets the statutory and constitutional requirements for the office he seeks. And Mr. Siddiqui lists how he wished to have his name appear on the ballot. So it is our opinion that Mr. Siddiqui's AOI complied with section 558.2 and that his name should go on the ballot. So in conclusion, it is our opinion that each of the candidates' affidavits is sufficient except for Mr. Moore and Mr. Ruffalo, whose names should be omitted from the ballot for want of an affidavit of identity that strictly complies with section 558.2. And we want to reiterate that we needed to apply the strict compliance standard uniformly to both of these candidates.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I just had one quick follow-up question for Joe. Could you cite that case again with respect to the dates? I
Sure.
meant to write it down. I missed it.
So the case is Stumbo versus Rowe, and the citation is 332 Mishap 479. And the specific passage I'm looking at can be found at pages 482 and 483. And the date of that opinion is June 5th, 2020.
Thank you.
So I want to ask a question again as the non-legal person here. In looking through several of those applications and in my own private experience, every time that something is notarized, there is a stamp on it. So we have several of these that just have signatures. So my assumption is the stamp is not required. And I just want to make sure that that is correct.
Yes, so I have here the section that I believe Mr. Ruffalo had mentioned during public comment, and that is MCL 55.287. And paragraph 2 of that section provides that on each record that a notary performs a notarial act and immediately near the notary's public signature, as is practical, the notary public shall print, type, stamp, or otherwise imprint mechanically or electronically sufficiently clear and legible to be read by the secretary and in a manner capable of photographic reproduction, all of the following information. And it's the name of the notary public exactly as it appears on the application that they filed to become a notary, the statement, notary public, state of Michigan, county of, and then fill in the blank. The statement, my commission expires, and then you would fill in a date. And then if performing a notarial act in a county other than the county of commission, the statement acting in the county of, and then you would put that in there along with the date of the notarial act. And so the form that has been provided by the Department of State has all of those requirements already pre-printed on the form. So it's not required here that a stamp accompany that, because the stamp would really just in practice provide that same information. It is nonetheless fairly custom for notaries to do that, even when they filled in the information, to go ahead and just stamp the form as essentially a backup, but it's not required here in order to make the affidavit compliant.
And I appreciate that explanation, because my experience with notaries have been like on real estate documents or those that didn't have that form completed. So thank you for that information.
Sure.
All right.
I don't
Thank
have
you
any
all.
additional questions at this point.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. So next, we're going to, we're still on the action request, and that was an overview of that. So it's time to vote.
So I would make a motion to adopt the amended opinion letter from Butzel Long, and based upon that opinion letter, disqualify Marvin Moore and Greg Ruffalo from the November ballot for the reasons stated and contained in that opinion letter.
I would second that.
The motion and a second.
Yes.
Okay. Roll call, Commissioner Medley,
Yes.
and I'm voting yes. And Commissioner Baker.
Aye.
I'm sorry, my computer was in and out. I didn't.
I
hear
voted
that.
aye, yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Motion carried. Next, we have public comment, which is item number 8. If there are anyone in the audience or in the chat that would like to comment at this time, feel free to do so.
We have 3 hands raised. Looks like Bruce Cantor, Barb Canez, well, 4 now, Marvin Moore and Greg Ruffalo. So
Okay, all right, in that order. Mr. Cantor?
Yvette, before we begin, what is the time limit?
I believe this time limit is it 3 minutes for this one?
typically at council, we do allow 3 minutes for the second public comment section.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready for me?
Yes, Bruce, the timer's on.
Okay, so I didn't comment at the end of the last meeting as I really wanted to kind of gather my thoughts first. And I do have to say I am a little disappointed in Butzel Long's handling of this engagement, an engagement that's costing the city obviously a lot of money. You know, I had actually some more severe comments planned for our next council meeting to discuss this until we received the revised opinion this week. You know, where I feel, you know, Butzel did redeem themselves quite a bit. But the second opinion is what I initially expected to see. You know, namely a line by line review explaining both the fatal and non-fatal flaws. And I know in the first meeting, you know, Butzel said that, you know, that their first opinion was really a draft or preliminary. But if that was the case, it should have had draft written all over it. And, you know, as a result, there were a lot of errors in that quote unquote draft. So for example, they disqualified Karen Miller and Barb Kinez because of the lack of a second copy of their affidavit, when, a simple phone call to the city could have avoided that issue, which caused, I'm sure, a lot of stress to those two candidates and a lot of anxiety that they really didn't need. The most glaring disqualification, Marvin Moore's, where the citizen box wasn't checked, was completely missed. I think I brought that up in the last meeting, and it was just kind of embarrassing for the city and made the city look somewhat less than competent. And then I also feel really bad for Greg Ruffalo, who as of the last opinion was deemed a viable candidate, and then a week later is now deemed a non-viable candidate and disqualified. One thing I had heard was that Greg spent about $500 of his money after he was deemed as a valid candidate on candidate materials and literature and so forth, and now he's no longer a candidate, so he's just wasted a lot of money. So I think some of that could have been avoided. And then overall, in terms of the overall process, city and everything, it just didn't go as smoothly as I think we would have liked. On a personal note, I went in both races because I wanted to ensure a democratic choice for our residents, and wanted to prevent the exact situation that we ended up with now having a partial term race with just one person in it. And had the appropriate information been there on July 23rd, when I submitted a resignation letter for one of the two terms, I would have chose to stay in that the partial term race, so that residents had a choice between candidates, instead of essentially just having a candidate walk right onto council. As it's difficult for a write-in candidate, if Greg decides to do a write-in, to win. So it was just very frustrating, because we're ending up in the same situation that we were trying to avoid, or I was trying to avoid, by strategically going into both races. So that's all I really want to say.
Thank you. The next person, please. Was that Mrs. Kinez? If my memory serves me correctly, I could be wrong.
Yes.
Okay.
On July 23rd, 3 days past the election deadline, I noticed that Mr. Ruffalo's name mysteriously appeared as Mr. Cantor's name disappeared on the 2-year term on the Oakland County unofficial candidate roster. Within minutes of seeing this discrepancy, I emailed the city clerk and Kelda London to request clarification on the matter. My name appeared within hours of the July 20th filing deadline, yet Mr. Ruffalo's name appeared 3 days later. 5 days later, I received a reply from the city attorney telling me everything was fine. He provided the same proof you all have, an affidavit of identity dated July 23rd, 2021, again, 3 days past the filing deadline. Needless to say, this brought more questions than answered, and I pursued and was dismissed without ever receiving a follow-up until today. And here we are, a month and a half later, with an opinion from Butzel Long, who was in fact provided the very documents that would have cleared this matter up 46 days ago. All the information was in your possession when I requested the same on July 23rd, and this could have easily been reviewed by Mr. Baker, Ms. London, and Ms. Talley, the persons tasked with the duty of overseeing clerical matters at our city hall. This begs the question, were they unable or unwilling to handle the matter? This is just one of the many reasons why I'm running for city council right now. And I have absolutely nothing against Mr. Greg Ruffalo. I don't know the man. I'm sure he's perfectly lovely. This was not against Greg. It was against the deadline. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, if we can have Mr. Moore, please.
Yes, this is Martha Moore. I wanted to echo something that was said earlier about the law firm. I am a lawyer myself, and I was alarmed with the initial opinion that was submitted by the law firm. It gave no indication that it was a draft, and it was completely erroneous. It undermines the confidence in this process. And so I think Ms. Cantor said what I wanted to say, and was very disappointing. As a lawyer myself who's been practicing law for over 30 years, I served as the chairperson of the Attorney Grievance Commission, who oversees lawyer conduct. And that was concerning to me because that letter was, frankly, I think it might amount to malpractice. And Bruce Cantor said it best. So I just wanted to express my opinion. I know the city paid a lot of money for that, and I agree with him. Their recent letter is what we were expecting initially. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Ruffalo.
Thank you. Barb, I have nothing against you either. Thank you for that comment. I'm sure you're a lovely woman as well. Similar to Barb's rush to get her name on the ballot, I pulled mine together within days also, as I was unaware of the deadline of July 20th until I went to pay my water bill on July 17th. So very similar situation. But I also wanted to say that this entire process has been very exciting and at the same time very exhausting and discouraging. This has proven to be an educational time. This has proven to be an education, yet challenging first step in this election process. Now, I own and I take responsibility for my actions, written and spoken, past and present. I always have and I always will. My commitment and intent is and was to serve the residents of Lathrup Village and do what's right for our shared community. Now, that fact remains true indefinitely, whether I'm a member of city council or a private citizen. Having a passion to want to voluntarily serve our city has morphed into a costly and questionable string of conversations based on the materials submitted to run for office by several candidates. The decision that was reached on September 3rd appeared to be final based on the conversation and the definitive vote from the Election Commission that afternoon. Now, based on that decision that was verbally finalized and approved, I moved my campaign forward. Since that date, many strategic hours have been utilized and campaign funds have been spent, not only by me, by the city. It's been very costly. Now, 5 days later, that ruling is in question. What happens if we wait another couple of days? Another revision? I think the integrity and indecisiveness of our city is at stake. As I do not agree with the revised opinion letter and how we got here, I'm ready to move forward and I'm prepared for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, your Clerk Talley, the Mayor Garrett and Councilman Ferguson.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will have to say that this has been the most interesting race that I have ever kind of been involved with. First, when it came to the last meeting that we had, and this is a question, so I hope that someone will put it either in my email or share it with everyone. When you ask for the copy of the two affidavits, if I'm not mistaken, you were asking for a copy, the original, and then a copy of the cured affidavit with the corrections on it, not two copies of the actual affidavit. So I'm just making sure. I want to know the question about that, and I do expect to have an answer regarding that. And then also in speaking to a couple of clerks outside of Lathrup immediately as this is going on, and a county clerk, the fact that we totally threw out the need for a notary to verify who a person is. That's the whole reason why you have to have things notarized when someone signs something in front of you. Because if that's the case, we can go into any place, have a notarized, I can get copies of a notary to notarize things that I need and sign it after the fact. I think that that is questionable, and I have nothing against Barb Canez. I just think that she's making me open my eyes more to things that I will have to start reviewing or have to take this up to another level to have this discussed, because that is what make sure, having something notarized, make sure the person that's signing it is who they are and not 2 and 3 days afterwards. And I know that it's case law. However, I think that we as a city are going to have an issue with that. I also am disappointed with the fact is that now, yes, I agree with everyone that said something about it being a draft and that you were unsure of, or I shouldn't say unsure, but a draft of the original decision, because now you have cost us, the city, the residents, a lot of money to now change your mind for the most part. And I mean, personally, I'm not thrilled with it, but I know that probably goes nowhere, but I am unhappy with it. I think that this whole process, and I guess we have a lot of eternal discussions that will be had very, very soon, because I'm completely, utterly disgusted by the whole thing. And I just really have to acknowledge how angry I am right now, because I really feel like democracy was not served today. I think that and if I was someone that was a conspiracy theorist, I would lean on the other people that I would start taking on the same thoughts that other people have been taking on if I was a conspiracy theorist. So I appreciate you all gathering at the last minute again. And I'm extremely disappointed, but I would say that this is going to be further discussed in our meeting on Monday. Thank you.
Hello, are you there? You can hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, thanks. Hey, it's Ian Ferguson. So I guess Bruce beat me to the punch, even though I said this last week when we met. Yes, this process was a nightmare. I mean, I believe that based on Butzel's initial handling of it was really embarrassing, to say the least. I'm not going to beat you guys up any further, but part of this is the first part of it was just unacceptable, was unprofessional, and was just totally beneath any professional law firm that I've seen in decades. Your course correct today, however, was professional, and the details you provided, I respected and I honor. But again, we're coming back to the initial cost, the cost of trust, the cost of a financial deficit for the city, and just the impressions of how a commission should handle this process. I mean, initially we wanted to keep it in-house, but again, we felt it necessary to engage an independent law firm, and it just wasn't handled the way we thought it would be handled. So not going to beat you guys up any further. The second observation is for Barb Kinez. So you're stating that's the reason why you're running for office. I realize you went through a lot, but at the same time, you have to understand you cannot control the staff. We have a very professional staff here at the city, and if they have a problem, we take it up directly with the city manager. If the city manager is not doing her job, then council would step in. So the job basically that you're running for is really to engage your constituents and find out exactly what they need, and then you go up to the Hill and you fight for that. It is not to give guidance to the staff. The last part of this is we really wouldn't be here if just residents would learn how to fill out an affidavit. I mean, I know a 12-year-old that can fill that out without any issue. And yes, Greg made many mistakes on there and he's owned up to it, but it sounds like the people that made mistakes, they're still pointing fingers at other people. You know, the staff didn't do this, Greg didn't do that. How about you? It's a simple affidavit. Do you have any idea what I went through with my affidavit with Mayor Brock? That was triple checked and I turned it in 4 weeks early. So this last minute charging up the hill, leaving the barn door open is unacceptable. You got to get people to actually trust you now. You're in a public space and you can't limit your public space. And that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
Yes, hello. This is Karen Miller.
Yes.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank you all for finally doing the right thing. I think there were problems from the very beginning. I've worked with Yvette Talley for many years, and she's very competent, very professional. I have never seen anything like this in all of the time that she has been our city clerk. If she was out on personal reasons, then it is the responsibility of city leadership to make sure that whoever is taking over her responsibilities has some kind of proper training. I think perhaps that might have prevented a lot of this in the beginning. Also, as far as our mayor pro tem illegally filing for 2 positions at the same time, that also created a lot of questions and suspicions. The arrogance, the condescending, defensive attitudes that have come out over the last month and a half, like that's unacceptable. We have residents and candidates asking legitimate questions about why something seemed to have happened after the deadline. If the questions had been answered in a timely manner, where they were raised 3 days after the filing deadline, this would not have blown up into this big mess. And as far as the city manager, she was copied on several of the correspondence, and no one responded. The only one that ever responded was the attorney, Scott Baker. So communication, preparation, proper preparation, those are the kinds of things that contribute to the way that the city of Lathrup Village has run in the past. And again, I'm running to make sure that we meet the standards that our residents expect. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
No.
I wanted to speak if I could.
Sure.
Okay, so a couple things. I think that people have fully expressed how we feel as a group regarding the presentation of something that was presented to us as a final copy, a final opinion, and now has been represented to us as a draft. And so I do agree that that has led to a lot of issues of trust. I believe it has also really made people question the integrity of this process. The other thing that I found very interesting is as we went through this legal opinion, and I've been very clear about the fact that I am not an attorney, but there were things that were deemed based on case law to be fatal, but yet other things that typically as citizens we are required to do as part of legal requirements that were no longer, deemed necessary. And a couple of things that I raised questions about. One was, whether or not the stamp had to be used for a notary. We asked whether or not the date had to be correct. On any other document, that would be a fatal error if a notary date didn't match a signature date. On any other document that we complete, a birth date not being included would be a fatal error. And I guess back in 8th grade, when I took, my constitutional class, you had to be at least 18 years old to run for office. You had to be eligible to vote. So essentially by not including a birth date or making it recommended, and I understand that is case law and that is opinion, it makes it really difficult to trust whether or not this form, number one, it obviously wasn't easy to understand for people to fill out because virtually everyone made a mistake on the form at one point or another. And so that's an issue. But really what I think has happened through this entire process, we entered into a legal contract with a law firm to help us avoid liability and to strengthen the integrity of this process. And that has fundamentally failed. It has failed. I mean, at this point, I believe in many ways we should have handled it ourselves because at this point we wouldn't be out all of the money And I also still feel liable during this process. So finally, I think that this has, led me to see a whole variety of candidates in a very different way. And it's also made me understand that politics are not a business that anyone has entered into for the benevolent good of the village. So I've heard numerous candidates now mention that they're running for the good of the village, and then they've swung out at our staff. The staff are working there, they're doing their very best, and we have candidates now who are swinging at them and who are attacking them. We've had candidates now who've attacked our city attorney. We've had candidates who've attacked each other. And again, this is not Lathrup Village the way that we want it to be. This is actually Lathrup Village the way it has become. And I just find that incredibly disappointing. And I don't necessarily see how any of this process helped us heal that or make it any better or decrease our liability when it comes to a suit for disallowing a candidate.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
If I could just briefly, Yvette, I will take ownership for a lot of the miscommunication with respect to the engagement of Butzel Long. I do think that it was my recommendation to the staff and to the mayor that we go outside of the city to engage this opinion and review, and I will take ownership that I feel as if perhaps in my attempts to have an impartial or completely unbiased opinion and not giving any indicators to the reviewing team what we were looking for, that perhaps they didn't have the guidance that they normally would have had, and it wasn't until that first meeting on September 3rd that they did get more direction from the city as to what exactly we had engaged them to do. So I will take some ownership and responsibility for that. That's something that I probably should have been more clear about. But I will turn it over to Beth, because I do believe she wants to address the commission with respect to some of the concerns that were raised.
Thank you. And I think that Mr. Baker said it well, that we were retained by the city, by Lathrup Village on August 26th to provide a written opinion as to whether any candidates fail to comply with the applicable election laws and regulations, of which there are quite a few. The city had not indicated it had identified any issues, but rather it simply said that it wanted Butzel to engage in an independent, unbiased review. And then we were told a couple days later that the commission wanted to have a meeting the following day, September 1st, and can we get a letter out real quick to them, which we tried to comply with. And really it was on September 1st was our first, as Mr. Baker said, our first real communication with you. Yes, we should have marked draft on that letter, and we didn't. We take full responsibility for that. And it was at that, as I said, at that meeting where we got more facts and understood more of your concerns to allow us to draft a better letter, a more precise letter. But normally we would not have, we work very quickly to try and get you something quickly. And we were really looking forward to the September 1st meeting to give us more direction and more information, which we got. And we do understand the clerk was kind of challenged because she just had death in the family. And we were trying to figure out who can give us what information.
Okay, Beth, I want to stop you because at that point, when you said the clerk was challenged because she had a death in the family, you put the blame back on her.
Well, forgive me, that was not the intent. It was just, we were not familiar with who to talk to and how to get some of the information. So that, thank you for pointing that out, because that's not my intent. I just wanted to give you the background where we were coming from. And I'm glad that, you felt that the letter that you have before you today is a better letter. It's clearer, and hopefully we have responded to a lot of the issues that you've raised at that time. And, that's, I think, we do appreciate your concerns that you raised today, and we have taken those to heart.
Would like to offer something as well. There are some systemic issues in terms of the forms and the processes. And I know in some counties, if you submit your forms and there's information that is missing or is in error, they will contact you and let you know that you need to correct it and make those modifications if it's in advance of the deadline. And that is not the practice in Oakland County. It would be helpful if that were the practice in Oakland County. And that's all that I can say in regards to that. It is not the obligation of the local clerks to do that, and it's not the obligation of the Oakland County clerk to do that. But it would be most helpful if they did.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
Yes, Councilman Ferguson would like to.
Yeah, sorry, one last observation. So can you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. One last observation. So let's try to turn the page here, okay? There were lessons learned, and yeah, there were some hurt feelings. That's been happening for months now. So at this point, I'm willing to offer my services to the candidates who are willing to meet with me. So far, I've met with everyone with the exception of Barb Kinez, Karen Miller, and Marvin Moore. My number is public. My email is public. Please send me an email if you wish to meet. I could talk to you about how the sausage is made on council, basically. But at this point, it's time for us to at least try to come together, because this is not standard protocol where someone's running for office and they don't even contact council people, or they don't walk in and introduce themselves to the city manager. This comes from a higher degree of government, and is trickling down in the worst way possible. So I'm offering my services, so please feel free to reach out, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
No other hands raised at this time.
Thank you very much. We will move into the adjournment. And if I can have a motion and second to adjourn this meeting.
I will make that motion. Oh, I'll second.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Meeting
you.
adjourned.